Let's begin by making our first table. We first have to connect to the Linux prompt. We've seen how to do that before. Then we have to connect to the MySQL prompt. We've seen how to do that. Put in our password and we're connected to the MySQL prompt. Now at that point I'm going to type a command, show tables. You'll notice that command ends with a semicolon. All MySQL commands end with a semicolon. That semicolon is known as a delimiter. In fact, you could put two commands on the same line as long as you separate them by that delimiter, the thing that separates them, that separates the limit. I could show table semicolon followed by another command semicolon. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just first do show tables, where you see I don't have any tables. No surprise there, we've just begun the course. Now I'm going to create a table called students. So the first three words are create table and then the name of the table, students. But before I do anything else, I better discuss a little bit about data types. So I'm not going to give the whole extensive lecture, but there are two different data types that you should know. Char or char or character, that's usually what I call it, versus varchar, varchar, or variable character, however you want to pronounce it. I don't have a big issue with it anyway, but character data is always fixed length, so you might make the Enum field the size of 10, in which case it would have to pad that data so that the size is exactly that. The variable character data is only as much space as you need, so if you had set it up to be of size 10 but you only needed 3 for, say, the name Joe or Bob, then that's all you would need. Now you can, in both cases, specify default. You don't have to. You can also specify that not null, which means that it must have a value. Null is no known value. And you can specify that it, in effect, can't be blank. In terms of numbers, you can have integers, whole numbers, or floating point numbers. It has the word float and then in parentheses length, comma, decimals. In some cases, we will use not null. We will use auto increment sometimes. We might want something to be integer that will auto increment. So record 1, record 2, record 3, it automatically increments that number. There's also an enum field. As an example, married, that could be an enum field that has two possibilities, yes or no. And maybe because I'm dealing with college students, I might by default assume the answer might be no. Obviously, we would be able to change that if that wasn't the answer. In that case, it's two states, but that's not always appropriate. So we could also have a field called married that gives an example of single, married, or divorced, with the default being single. That's a possibility as well, and there's legally separated and widowed and so on. We could have all different status there. But that means that in this case, married is a field that can only contain the words single, married, or divorced. Or in the previous example, only a Y or an N. And for that matter, a capital Y or a capital N. There's also date and time type data. So date would be things like year, month, day. That's usually the order that it's put in Linux. Or there's time, so the hour, minute, seconds. You can have a date time that includes both the date and the time, or a timestamp that goes right down to 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, 2 digits for hour, 2 for minute, and 2 for seconds. Now, let's go back to creating that table called students. So we've written create table students, but we're going to press enter without putting a semicolon because we're not done. And you'll notice there the prompt changes, because without that semicolon it means your command has not been fully written. So it's waiting to execute the command until it finds that semicolon. So the first thing we write is id int primary key not null auto underscore increment. We haven't talked about what a primary key is, but it's a unique identifier. So this is going to have an ID field that is of type integer. Primary key, that unique identifier means everybody will have their own unique number, their own unique integer. Not null means it can't be blank, so it has to have a number. And auto underscore increment means it's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So the first student will have an ID of 1, the second student an ID of 2, and so on. Now I also have an fname field. I put char 15, character 15 there. And in that case, fname will be padded. You won't notice it. It won't be any difference to you one way or the other. Hometown, I put varchar 25. Semesters I made integer because I want to ask how many semesters you've been going to school here. And for your major, we have an enum field that's either going to be CS, CIS, CYB, or other. We're not really concerned if you're not one of the CIS majors. You'll notice it says query OK, 0 rows affected, because the query worked, it executed, and there are no rows in the table. That's why none were affected. When I type describe students, that's the name of the table. So the word describe and then the name of the table followed by a semicolon. You'll see it lists those 5 fields and it tells you a little bit about them. At that point, when I do show tables, I do actually have one table showing. Now, if I go to create it again, you'll see what happens. Table student already exists. You can't create something twice. So don't even try. Now, the next line I'm going to put is an insert statement. It says insert into students, and then in parentheses it puts all the field names except ID. Fname, hometown, semesters, majors. With the values then being, in this case, Carl from Johnstown, 2 semesters and a CIS major. Why didn't I put the ID? Because it's going to auto increment. It'll find the next available ID and it'll use that. So it says query OK, 1 row affected because I just created 1 row. I can add a whole bunch of people more. I got Sean from Johnstown and Kevin from Fort Plain and Edward from Amsterdam and Alex from Schoharie. I continue on, add a whole bunch more students. A lot of work, a lot of typing. And when I'm all done, I'm going to say select star from students. Star is an asterisk. It's a wild card. It means anything. It actually means everything. So it'll show me everything about the students table. And when I get that list, I see I've got 21 students from Carl to Michael, and I see the number of semesters, and I see the number, their major,